43. To Will, the palm of the hand that drifted up was like the moon rising. Upon it was the fiery blue inked portrait of himself. Jim, too, saw a hand before his face. His own picture looked back at him from the palm. The hand with Will's picture grabbed Will. The hand with Jim's picture grabbed Jim. Shrieks and yells. The illustrated man heaved. Twisting, he fell, jumped to the floor. The boys, kicking, yelling, fell with him. They landed on their feet, toppled, collapsed, to be held, reared, set right, fistfuls of shirts in Mr. Dark's fist. Jim, he said. Will, what are you doing up there, boys? Surely not reading. Dad, Mr. Holloway. Will's father stepped from the dark. The illustrated man rearranged the boys tenderly under one arm like kindling, then gazed with genteel curiosity at Charles Holloway and reached for him. Will's father struck one blow before his left hand was seized, held, squeezed. As the boys watched shouting, they saw Charles Holloway gasp and fall to one knee. Mr. Dark squeezed that left hand harder, and doing this slowly, certainly, pressured the boys with his other arm, crushing their ribs so air gushed from their mouths. Crushing their ribs so air gushed from their mouths. Night spiraled in fiery whorls like great thumbprints inside Will's eyes. Will's father, groaning, sank to both knees, flailing his right arm. Darn you! But, said the carnival owner quietly, I'm all ready. Darn you, darn you! No, not words, old man, said Mr. Dark. Not words in books or words you say, but real thoughts, real actions. Quick thought, quick action win the day. So, he gave one last mighty clench of his fist. The boys heard Charles Holloway's finger bones crack. He gave a last cry and fell senseless. In one motion, like a solemn pavane, the illustrated man rounded the stacks, the boys kicking books from the shelves under his arms. Will, feeling walls, books, floors fly by, foolishly thought, pressed close. Why, Mr. Dark smells like calliope stream. Both boys were dropped suddenly. Before they could move or regain their breath, each was gripped by the hair on their head and roused marionettes-wise to face a window, a street. Boys, you read Dickens? Mr. Dark whispered. Critics hate his coincidences, but we know, don't we? Life's all coincidence. Turn death and happenstance flakes off him like fleas from a killed ox. Look, both boys writhed in an iron-maiden clutch of hungry saurians and bristly apes. Will did not know whether to weep or joy or new despair. Below, across the avenue, passing from church, going home, was his mother and Jim's mother. Not on the carousel, not old, crazy, dead in jail, but freshly out in the good October air. She had not been 100 yards away in church during all the last 5 minutes. Mom, screamed Will, against the hand which, anticipating his cry, clamped tight to his mouth. Mom, crooned Mr. Dark mockingly. Come, save me. No, thought Will, save yourself, run. But his mother and Jim's mother simply strolled content from the warm church through the town. Mom, screamed Will again, and some small muffled bleat of it escaped the sweaty Paul. Will's mother, 1,000 miles away over on that sidewalk, paused. She couldn't have heard, thought Will, yet she looked over at the library. Good, sighed Mr. Dark. Excellent, fine. Here, thought Will. See us, Mom. Run, call the police. Why doesn't she look at this window? Asked Mr. Dark quietly. And see us three standing as for a portrait. Look over, then come running. We'll let her in. Will strangled a sob. No. His mother's gaze trailed from the front entrance to the first floor windows. Here, said Mr. Dark. Second floor, a proper coincidence. Let's make it proper. Now Jim's mother was talking. Both women stood together at the curb. No, thought Will. Oh, no. And the women turned and went away into the Sunday night town. Will felt the illustrated man slump the tiniest bit. Not much of a coincidence. No crisis, no one lost or safe. Pity. Well, dragging the boy's feet, he glided down to the open front door. Someone waited in the shadows. A lizard hand scurried cold on Will's chin. Holloway, husked the witch's voice. A chameleon perched on Jim's nose. Nightshade, whisked the dry broom voice. Behind her stood the dwarf and the skeleton, silent, shifting, apprehensive. Obedient to the occasion, the boys would have given their best stored yells air. But again, on the instant, recognizing their need, the illustrated man trapped the sound before it could issue forth, then nodded curtly to the old dust woman. The witch toppled forward with her seamed black wax sewn shut iguana eyelids and her great proboscis with the nostrils caked in tobacco-blackened pipe bowls, her fingers tracing, weaving a silent plinth of symbols of the mind. The boy stared. Her fingernails fluttered, darted, feathered, cold winter water air. Her pickled green frog's breath crawled their flesh and pimples as she sang softly, mewing, humming, glistering their babes. her boys, her friends of the slick snail-tracked roof, the straight-flung arrow, the stricken and sky-drowned balloon. Darning needle dragonfly, sew up these mouths so they do not speak. Touch, so, her thumbnail punched, drew along their lower upper lips until they were pouched shut with invisible thread. Darning needle dragonfly, sew up these ears so they not hear. Cold and funneled Will's airs, burying her voice, muffled, far away, fading, she chanted on with a rustle, tick, tickle, tap, flourish of caliper hands. Moss grew in Jim's ears, swiftly sealing him deep. Darning needle dragonfly, sew up these eyes so they not see. Her white-hot fingerprints rolled back their stricken eyeballs to throw the lids down with bangs like great tin doors slammed shut. Will saw a billion flashbulbs explode then suck to darkness, while the unseen darning needle insect out beyond somewhere pranced and fizzed like insect drowned to sun-warmed honeypot, as closeted voice stitched off their senses forever and a day beyond. Darning needle dragonfly, have done with eye, ear, lip, and tooth. Finish him, so dark, mound dust, heap with slumber sleep. Now tie all knots, ever so neat, plump silence in blood like sand in river deep. So, the witch, somewhere outside the boys, lowered her hands. The boys stood silent. The illustrated man took his embrace from them and stepped back. The woman from the dust sniffed at her own twin triumphs, ran her hand a last loving time over her statues. The dwarf toddled madly about in the boys' shadows, nibbling daintily at her fingernails, softly calling their names. The illustrated man nodded toward the library. The janitor's clock. Stop it. The witch, mouth wide, savoring doom, wandered off into the marble quarry. Mr. Dark said, left, right, 1, 2. The boys walked down the steps, the dwarf at Jim's side, the skeleton at Will's. Serene as death, the illustrated man followed. 44. Somewhere near, Charles Holloway's hand lay in a white-hot furnace, melted to sheer nerve and pain. He opened his eyes. At the same moment he heard a great breath as the front door swung shut and a woman's voice came singing in the hall. Old man, old man, old man, old man. Where his left hand should be was the swelled blood pudding which pulsed with such ecstasies of pain it fed forth his life, his will, his whole attention. He tried to sit up, but the pain hammer-blowed him down again. Old man, not old. 54 is not old, he thought wildly. And here she came on the worn stone floors, her moth fingers tapping, scanning Braille book titles as her nostrils siphoned the shadows. Charles Holloway hunched and crawled toward the nearest stack, cramming pain back with his tongue. He must climb out of reach, climb where books might be weapons flung down upon any night-crawling pursuer. Old man, hear you breathing. She drifted on his tide, let her body be summoned by every sibilant hiss of his pain. Old man, feel your hurt. If he could fling the pain out the window, where it might lie beating like a heart, summoning her away, tricked to go see this awful fire bent in the street, he imagined her brisking her palms at this throb, an abandoned chunk of delirium, but no, the hand stayed, glowed, poisoned the air, hurrying the strange nun-gypsy's tread as she gasped her avaricious mouth most ardently. Darn you, he cried. Get it over with, I'm here. So the witch wheeled swift as a black-clothed dummy on rubber rollers and swayed over him. He did not even look at her. Such weights and pressures of despair and exertion fought for his attention. He could only free his eyes to watch the inside of his lids, upon which multiple ever-changing looms of terror jigged and jambled. Very simple, the whisper went bent low. Stop the heart. Why not, he thought vaguely. Slow, she murmured. Yes, he thought, slow, very slow. His heart, once bolting, now fell away to a strange disease, disquiet than quiet than ease. Much more slow, she suggested. Tired, yes. You hear that, heart? He wondered. His heart heard. Like a tight fist it began to relax, a finger at a time. Stop all for good. Forget all for good, she whispered. Well, why not? Slower, slowest. His heart stumbled, and then for no reason save perhaps a last look around because he did want to get rid of the pain, and sleep was the way to do that. Charles Holloway opened his eyes. He saw the witch. He saw her fingers working at the air, his face, his body, the heart within his body, and the soul within the heart. Her swamp breath flooded him, while, with immense curiosity, he watched the poisonous drizzle from her lips, counted the folds in her stitch-wrinkled eyes, the Gia monster neck, the mummy linen ears, the dry bearded river-sand brow. Never in his life was he focused so nearly to a person, as if she were a puzzle which, once touched together, might show life's greatest secret. The solution was in her. It would all spring clear this moment. No, the next. Watch her scorpion fingers, hear her chant as she diddled the air. Yes, diddled was it. Tickling. Slow, she whispered, slow, and his obedient heart pulled rein. Diddle, tickle went her fingers. Charles Holloway snorted. Faintly he giggled. He caught this. Why? Why am I giggling at such a time? The witch pulled back the merest quarter-inch as if some strange but hidden electric light socket, touched with wet whorl, gave shock. Charles Holloway saw but did not see her flinch, sensed, and seemed in no way to consider her withdrawal, for almost immediately seizing the initiative, she flung herself forward, not touching but merely gesticulating as one might try to spell an antique clock pendulum. "Slow!" she cried. Senselessly he permitted an idiot smile to balloon itself up from somewhere to attach itself with careless ease under his nose. Slowest! Her new fever, her anxiety, which changed itself to anger, was even more of a toy to him. A part of his attention, secret until now, leaned forward to scan every pore of her Halloween face. Somehow, irresistibly, the prime thing was. Nothing mattered. Life in the end seemed a prank of such a size you could only stand off at this end of the corridor to note its meaningless length and its quite unnecessary height, a mountain built to such ridiculous immensities you were dwarfed in its shadow and mocking of its pump. So with death this near, he thought numbly but purely upon a billion vanities, arrivals, departures, idiot excursions of boy, man, and old man goat. He had gathered and stacked all manner of foibles, devices, playthings, and his egotism, and now, between all the silly corridors of his books, the toys of his life swayed, and none more grotesque than this thing named Witch Gypsy Reader of Dust, tickling, that's what, just tickling the air. Fool, didn't she know what she was doing? He opened his mouth. Of itself, like a child born of an unsuspecting parent, one single raw laugh broke free. The witch swooned back. Charles Holloway did not see. He was far too busy letting the joke rush through his fingers, letting hilarity spring forth of its own volition along his throat, eyes squeezed shut. There it flew, whipping shrapnel in all directions. "You," he cried, to no one, everyone, himself, her, them, it all. "Funny! You!" "No," the witch protested. "Stop tickling," he gasped. "Not," she lunged back frantically. "Not. Sleep. Slow. Very slow." "No, tickling is all it is for sure," he roared. "Oh, ha, 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 stop." "Yes, stop heart," she squealed. "Stop blood." Her own heart must have shaken like a trampoline. Her hands shook. In mid-gesticulation she froze and became aware of the silly fingers. "OMG," he wept beautifully glad tears. "Get off my ribs, oh ha, go on my heart." "Your heart, yes. God," he popped his eyes wide, gulped air, released more soap and water, washing everything clear, incredibly clean. "Toys, the key sticks out of your back. Who wound you up?" The largest roar of all flung at the woman, burnt her hands, seared her face, or so it seemed, for she seized herself as from a blast furnace, wrapped her fried hands in Egyptian rags, gripped her dry rugs, skipped back, gave pause, then started a slow retreat, nudged, pushed, pummeled, inch by inch, foot by foot, clattering book racks, shelves, fumbling for head-holds on volumes that thrashed free as she scrambled them down. Her brow knocked dim histories, vain theories, doomed up time, promised but compromised years. Chased, bruised, beaten by his laugh, which echoed, rang, swam to fill the marble vaults, she whirled at last, claws razoring the wild air, and fled to fall downstairs. Moments later she managed to cram herself through the front door. It slammed. Her fall, the door slam, almost broke his frame with laughter. "Oh, God, please stop. Stop yourself," he begged of his hilarity. And thus begged his humor let be. In mid-roar, at last, all faded to honest laughter, pleasant chuckling, faint giggling, then softly with great contentment, receiving and giving breath, shaking his happy weary head, the good ache of action in his throat and ribs. Gone from his crumpled hand, he lay against the stacks, head leaned to some dear befriending book, the tears of releaseful mirth salting his cheeks, and suddenly he knew her gone. Why, he wondered, what did I do? With one last bark of mirth he rose up, slow. What's happened? Oh, God, let's get it clear. First, the drugstore, a half-dozen aspirin to cure his hand for an hour, then think. In the last 5 minutes, you did win something, didn't you? What's victory taste like? Think, try to remember. And smiling a new smile at the ridiculous dead animal left hand nestled in his right crooked elbow, he hurried down the night corridors and out into town. 3 departures. 45. The small parade moved, soundless, past the eternally revolving, ending but unending candy serpentine of Mr. Crossetti's barber pole, past all the darkening or darkened shops of emptying streets, for people were home now from the church suppers, or out at the carnival for the last sideshow, or the last high-laddered diver, floating like milkweed down the night. Will's feet far away below clubbed the sidewalk. 1, 2, he thought. Someone tells me. Left, right, dragonfly whispers. 1, 2. Is Jim in the parade? Will's eyes flicked, the briefest to one side. Yes, but who's the other little one? But gone mad, everything's interesting, so touch it, everything's red-hot pull-back dwarf. Plus the skeleton, and then behind, where all those hundreds, no thousands of people. marching along, breathing down his neck, the illustrated man. Will nodded and whined so high and silently that only dogs who are no help, dogs who could not speak, might hear. And sure enough, looking obliquely over, he saw not one, not two, but 3 dogs who, smelling the occasion, their own parade, now ran ahead, now fell behind, their tails like guidons for the platoon. Bark, thought Will, like in the movies. Bark, bring the police, but the dogs just smiled and trotted. Coincidence, please, thought Will, just a small one. Mr. Tetley, yes, Will saw, but did not see Mr. Tetley. Rolling the wooden Indian sank back into his shop, closing for the night. Turn heads, murmured the illustrated man. Jim turned his head. Will turned his head. Mr. Tetley smiled. Smile, murmured Mr. Dark. The 2 boys smiled. Hello, said Mr. Tetley. Say hello, someone whispered. Hello, said Jim. Hello, said Will. The dogs barked. A free ride at the carnival, murmured Mr. Dark. Free ride, said Will. At the carnival, clapped Jim. Then, like good machines, they shut up their smiles. Have fun, called Mr. Tetley. The dogs barked joy. The parade marched on. Fun, said Mr. Dark. Free rides. When the crowd goes home half an hour from now, we'll ride Jim around. You still want that, Jim? Hearing but not hearing, locked away in himself, Will thought, Jim, don't listen. Jim's eyes slid, wet or oily, it was hard to tell. You'll travel with us, Jim, and if Mr. Cougar doesn't survive, it's a near thing for him. We haven't saved him yet. We'll try again now. But if he doesn't make it, Jim, how would you like to be partners? I'll grow you to a fine, strong age, 22, 25, dark and nightshade and dark. Sweet, lovely names for such as we, with such as the side shows to run around the world. What say, Jim? Jim said nothing, sewn up in the witch's dream. Don't listen, wailed his best friend, who heard nothing but heard it all. And Will, said Mr. Dark, let's ride him back and back, Make him a babe in arms, a babe for the dwarf to carry like a clown child, round about in parades every day for the next 50 years. Would you like that, Will? To be a babe forever, not be able to walk and tell about all the lovely things you know? Yes, I think this is the best for Will, a plaything, a little wet friend for the dwarf. Will must have screamed, but not out loud, for only the dogs barked in terror, yipping. Off they ran, as it pelted with rocks. A man came around the corner, a policeman. Who's this? Muttered Mr. Dark. Mr. Kolb, said Jim. Mr. Kolb, said Will. Darning needle, whispered Mr. Dark. Dragonfly. Pain stabbed Will's ears. Moth stuffed his eyes. Gum glued his teeth. He felt a multitudinous tapping, shuttling, weaving about his face, all numb again. Say hello to Mr. Kolb. Hello, said Jim. Kolb, said the dreaming Will. Hello, boys, gentlemen. Turn here, said Mr. Dark. They turned, away toward meadow country, away from warm lights, good towns, safe streets. The drumless march progressed. 46. Stretched out over a mile of territory, the straggling parade now moved as follows. At the edge of the carnival midway, stumping the grass with their dead feet, Jim and Will paced, friends who constantly retold the wondrous uses of darning needle dragonflies. Behind, a good half-mile, trying to catch up, walking mysteriously wounded, the gypsy who whirl-cymbaled the dust. And yet farther back came the janitor father, now slowing himself with the remembrances of age, now pacing swiftly, young with thoughts of the brief first encounter and victory, carrying his left hand padded to his chest, chewing medicines as he went. At the midway rim, Mr. Dart looked back as if an inner voice had named the stragglers in his widely separated maneuver, but the voice failed and he was unsure. He nodded briskly, and dwarf skeleton Jim, Will, thrust through the crowd. Jim felt the river of bright people wash by all around, but not touching. Will heard waterfall, laughter, here, there, and him walking through the downpour. An explosion of fireflies blossomed on the sky. The Ferris wheel, exultant as the Titanic fireworks, dilated above them. Then they were at the mirror maze, and sidling, colliding, bumping, careening through the unfolded ice ponds, where stricken, spider-stung boys, much like themselves, appeared, vanished 1,000 times over. That's me, thought Jim. But I can't help me, thought Will, no matter how many of me there are. And crowd of boys plus crowd of reflected Mr. Dark's illustrations, for he had taken off his coat and skirt now, crammed and crushed through the waxworks at the end of the maze. Sit, said Mr. Dark, stay. Among the wax figures of murdered, gunshot, guillotined, garroted men and women, the 2 boys sat like Egyptian cats, unblinked, untwitched, unswallowing. Some late visitors passed through laughing. They commented on the wax figures. They did not notice the thin line of saliva crept from the corner of one wax boy's mouth. They did not see how bright was the second wax boy's stare, which suddenly brimmed and ran clear water down his cheek. Outside, the witch limped in through the back alleys of rope and peg between the tents. Ladies and gentlemen, the last crowd of the night, 300 or 400 strong, turned as a body, the illustrated man stripped to the waist, all nightmare, viper, saber-tooth, libidinous ape, clotted vulture, all salmon sulphur sky rose up with annunciations. The last free event this evening, come one, come all. The crowd surged toward the main platform outside the freak tent, where stood Dwarf Skeleton and Mr. Dark, the most amazingly dangerous, oft-times fatal, world-famous bullet trick. The crowd gasped with pleasure. The rifles, if you please. The thin one cracked wide a racked display of bright artillery. The witch, hurrying up, rose when Mr. Dark cried, "And here our death defier, the bullet catcher who will stake her life, Mademoiselle Tarot." The witch shook her head, bleated, but Dark's hand swept down to swing her like a child to the platform, still protesting, which gave Dark pause. But in front of everyone now, he went on, "A volunteer, please, to fire the rifle." The crowd rumbled softly, daring itself to speak up. Mr. Dark's mouth barely moved. Under his breath, he asked, "Is the clock stopped?" "Not," she whined, "stop." "No?" he almost burst out. He burnt her with his eyes, then turned to the audience and let his mouth finish the spiel. His fingers rapping over the rifles. "Volunteers, please, stop the act," the witch cried softly, wringing her hands. "It goes on, darn you, worse than double darn you," he whistled fiercely. Secretly, Dark gathered a pinch of flesh on his wrist. The illustration of a black nun blind woman, which he bit with his fingernails. The witch spasmed, seized her breast, groaned, ground her teeth. "Mercy!" she hissed, half aloud. Silence from the crowd. Mr. Dark nodded swiftly. "Since there are no volunteers," he scraped his illustrated wrist. The witch shuddered. "We will cancel our last act, and here, a volunteer." The crowd turned. Mr. Dark recoiled, then asked, "Where?" "Here." Far out at the edge of the crowd, a hand lifted, a path open. Mr. Dark could see very clearly the man standing there, alone. Charles Holloway, citizen, father, introspective husband, night wanderer, the janitor of the town library. 47. The crowd's appreciative clamor faded. Charles Holloway did not move. He let the path grow, leading down to the platform. He could not see the expression on the faces of the freaks standing up there. His eyes swept the crowd and found the mirror maze, the empty oblivion which beckoned with 10 times 1,000 million light years of reflections, counter-reflections, reversed and double reversed, plunging deep to nothing, face falling to nothing, stomach dropping away to yet more sickening plummets of nothing. And yet, wasn't there an echo of 2 boys in the powdered silver at the back of each glass? Did or did he not perceive with the tremulous tip of each of eyelash, if not the eye, their passage through, their weight beyond, warm wax amongst cold, waiting to be key-wound by terrors, run free in panics? "No," thought Charles Holloway, "don't think, get on with this." "Coming," he shouted, "get him, Pop." A man said, "Yes," said Charles Holloway, "I will." If he walked down through the crowd. The witch spun slowly, magnetized at the night-wandering volunteer's approach. Her eyelids jerked at their sewn black wax threads behind dark glasses. Mr. Dark, the illustration-drenched, super-infested civilization of souls, leaned from the platform, gladly wetting his lips. Thoughts spun fiery Catherine wheels in his eyes, quick. What? And the aging janitor, fixing a smile to his face like a white celluloid set of teeth from a Cracker Jack box, strode on, and the crowd opened as the sea before Moses closed behind, and him wondering what to do. Why was he here? But on the move steadily, nevertheless. Charles Holloway's foot touched the first step of the platform. The witch trembled secretly. Mr. Dark felt this secret, glanced sharply. Swiftly he put his hand out to grab for the good right hand of his 54-year-old old man. But the 54-year-old man shook his head, would not give his hand to be held, touched, or helped up. "Thanks, no." On the platform, Charles Holloway waved to the crowd. The people set off a few firecrackers of applause. "But," Mr. Dark was amazed, "your left hand, sir. You can't hold and fire a rifle. You have only the use of one hand." Charles Holloway paled. "I'll do it," he said, with one hand. "Hurrah!" cried a boy below. "Go it, Charlie," a man called out beyond. Mr. Dark flushed it. As the crowd laughed and applauded even louder now, he lifted his hands to ward off the wave of refreshing sound like rain that washed in from the people. All right, let's see if he can do it." Brutally, the illustrated man snapped a rifle from its locks and hurled it through the air. The crowd gasped. Charles Holloway ducked. He put up his right hand. The rifle slapped his palm. He grabbed it, did not fall. He had it good. The audience hooted, said things against Mr. Dark's bad manners, which made him turn away for a moment, damning himself silently. Will's father lifted the rifle, beaming. The crowd roared, and while the wave of applause came in, crashed, and went back down the shore, he looked again to the maze, where he sensed the but unseen shadow shapes of Will and Jim were filed among titanic razor blades of revelation and illusion. Then back to the Medusa gaze of Mr. Dark, swiftly reckoned with, and on the stitched and jittering sightless nun of midnight, sidling back still more. Now she was far as she could sidle, as at the far end of the platform, almost pressed to the world red-black rifle's bull's-eyes target. "Boys," shouted Charles Holloway. Mr. Dark stiffened. "I need a boy volunteer to help me hold the rifle," shouted Charles Holloway. "Someone, anyone," he shouted. A few boys in the crowd shifted around on their toes. "Boys," shouted Charles Holloway, "hold on, my son's out there. He's a volunteer, won't you, Will?" The witch flung one hand up to feel the shape of his audacity, which came off the 54-year-old man like fever. Mr. Dark was spun around as if hit by a fast-traveling gunshot. "Will," called his father. In the wax museum, Will sat motionless. "Will," called his father. "Come on, boy." The crowd looked left, looked right, looked back. No answer. Will sat in the wax museum. Mr. Dark observed all this with some respect, some degree of admiration, some concern. He seemed to be waiting just as was Will's father. "Will, come up and help your old man," Mr. Holloway cried jovially. Will sat in the wax museum. Mr. Dark smiled. Willie, come here." No answer. Mr. Dark smiled more. "Willie, won't you hear your old man?" Mr. Dark stopped smiling, for this last was the voice of a gentleman in the crowd speaking up. The crowd laughed. "Will," called a woman. "Willie," called another. "You-hoo," a gentleman in a beard. "Come on, William," a boy. The crowd laughed more, jostled elbows. Charles Holloway called. They called. Charles Holloway cried to the hills. They cried to the hills. "Will, Willie, William." A shadow shuttled and wove in the mirrors. The witch broke out chandeliers of sweat. There the crowd stopped calling, as did Charles Holloway, choked on the name of his son now and silent. For Will stood in the entrance of the maze like the wax figure that he almost was. "Will," called his father softly. The sound of this chimed the sweat off the witch. Will moved, unseeing, through the crowd, and handling the rifle down like a cane for the boy to grasp, his father drew him up onto the stand. "Here's my good left hand," announced the father. Will neither saw nor heard the crowd sound forth a solid and offensive applause. Mr. Dark had not moved, though Charles Holloway could see him during all this lighting and setting off cannon crackers in his head, but each one by one fizzled and died. Mr. Dark could not guess what they were up to. For that matter, Charles Holloway did not know or guess. It was as if he had written this play for himself over the years in the library, nights torn up the play after memorizing it, and now forgotten what he had set forth to remember. He was relying on secret discoveries of self moment by moment, playing by ear, no, heart and soul. And now the brightness of his teeth seemed to strike the witch blinder. Impossible. She flung one hand to her glasses, her sewn eyelids. "Closer, everyone," called Will's father. The crowd gathered in. The platform was an island. The sea was people. "Watch the bull's-eye target here." The witch melted in her rags. The illustrated man looked left, found no pleasure in the skeleton, who simply looked thinner, found no pleasure looking right to a dwarf who blandly dwelt in squashed idiot madness. "The bullet, please," Will's father said amiably. The 1,000 illustrations on his jerking horseflesh frame did not hear, so why should Mr. Dark? "If you please," said Charles Holloway. "The bullet, so I may knock that flea off the old gypsy's wart." Will stood motionless. Mr. Dark hesitated. Out in the choppy sea, smiles flashed here, there, 100, 200, 300 whitenesses. As if a vast titillation of water had been provoked by a lunar gravity, the tide ebbed. The illustrated man in slow motion proffered the bullet. His arm, a long molasses undulation, raised to offer the bullet to the boy, to see if he would notice. He did not notice. His brother took the missile. "Mark it with your initials," said Mr. Dark, "by rote." "No, with more." Charles Holloway raised his son's hand and made him hold the bullet, so he could take a penknife with his one good hand and carve a strange symbol on the lead. "What's lead? What's happening?" Will thought. "I know what's happening. I don't know what's happening. What?" Mr. Dark saw a crescent moon on the bullet, saw nothing wrong with such a moon, rammed it into the rifle, slapped the rifle back at Will's father, who once more caught it deftly. "Ready, Will?" The boy's peach face drowsed in the slightest nod. Charles Holloway flicked a last glance at the maze. Thought, "Jim, you there still? Get ready." Mr. Dark turned to go pat, conjure, calm his dust crony friend, but cracked to halt at the crack of the rifle being reopened, the bullet ejected by Will's father. To assure the audience it was there. It seemed real enough, yet he had read long ago that this was a substitute bullet, shaped of a very hard steel-colored crayon wax. Shot through the rifle, it would dissolve out of the barrel as smoke and vapor. At this very moment, having somehow switched bullets, the illustrated man was slipping the real marked bullet into the witch's jerking fingers. She would hide it in her cheek. At the shot, she would pretend to jolt under the imagined impact, then reveal the real bullet, caught by her yellow rat teeth. Fanfare, applause. The illustrated man, glancing up, saw Charles Holloway with the opened rifle, the wax bullet, but instead of revealing what he knew, Mr. Holloway simply said, "Let's cut our mark more cleanly, eh, boy?" And with his penknife, the boy holding the bullet in his senseless hand, he marked this fresh new wax, unmarked bullet with the same mysterious crescent moon, then snapped it back into the rifle. "Ready?" Mr. Dark looked to the witch. who hesitated, then nodded once faintly. "Ready," announced Charles Holloway, and all about lay the tents, the breathing crowd, the anxious freaks, a witch iced with hysteria, Jim hidden to be found, an ancient mummy still seated, glowing with blue fire in his electric chair, and a merry-go-round waiting for the show to cease, the crowd to go, and the carnival to have its way, with the boys and janitor trapped, if possible, and alone. "Will," said Charles Holloway conversationally, as he lifted the now suddenly heavy rifle, "your shoulder here is my brace. Take the middle of the rifle gently with one hand. Take it, Will." The boy raised a hand. "That's it, son. When I say hold, hold your breath. Hear me?" The boy's head trembled with slightest affirmation. He slept. He dreamed. The dream was a nightmare. The nightmare was this, and the next part of this was his father shouting, "Ladies, gentlemen!" The illustrated man clenched his fist. Will's picture, lost in it like a flower, was crushed. Will twisted. The rifle fell. Charles Holloway pretended not to notice. "Me and Will here will now together, him being the good left arm I can't use, do the one and only most dangerous, sometimes fatal bullet trick." Applause, laughter. Quickly the 54-year-old janitor, denying each cheer, laid the rifle back on the boy's jerking shoulder. "Hear that, Will? Listen, that's for us." The boy listened. The boy grew calm. Mr. Dark had tightened his fist. Will was taken with slight palsy. "We'll hit him bull's-eye on, won't we, boy?" said his father. More laughter, and the boy grew very calm indeed, with the rifle on his shoulder, and Mr. Dark squeezed tight on the peach-buzzed face, nestled in the flesh of his hand. But the boy was serene in the laughter which still flowed, and his father kept the hoop rolling thus. "Show the lady your teeth, Will." Will showed the woman against the target his teeth. The blood fell away from the witch's face. Now Charles Holloway showed her his teeth, too, such as they were, and winter lived in the witch. "Boy," said someone in the audience, "she's great. Act scared. Look." "I'm looking," thought Will's father, his left hand useless at his side, his right hand up to the rifle trigger, his face to the sight as his son held the rifle unansweringly pointed at the bull's-eye, and the witch's face superimposed there. And the last moment come, and a wax bullet in the chamber, and what could a wax bullet do? A bullet that dissolved in transit. What use? Why were they there? What could they do? Silly, silly. No, thought Will's father. Stop. He stopped the doubts. He felt his mouth shape the words with no sound. But the witch heard what he said. Above the dying laughter, before the warm sound was completely gone, he made these words silently with his lips. "The crescent moon I have marked on the bullet is not a crescent moon. It is my own smile. I have put my smile on the bullet in the rifle." He said it once. He waited for her to understand. He said it silently again, and in the moment before the illustrated man himself translated the mouthings quickly, Charles Holloway cried faintly, "Hold!" Will held his breath. Far back among wax statues, Jim hid away, dripped saliva from his chin. Strapped in an electric chair, a dead-alive mummy hummed power in its teeth. Mr. Dark's illustrations writhed with sick sweat as he clenched his fist a final time, but too late. Serene Will held breath, held weapon. Serene, his father said, "Now," and fired the rifle. 48. One shot. The witch sucked breath. Jim in the wax museum sucked breath, as did Will, asleep, as did his father, as did Mr. Dark, as did all the freaks, as did the crowd. The witch screamed. Jim, among the wax dummies, blew all the air from his lungs. Will shrieked himself awake on the platform. The illustrated man let the air from his mouth in a great angry bray, whipping up his hands to stop all events. But the witch fell. She fell off the platform. She fell in the dust. The smoking rifle in his good hand, Charles Holloway let his breath go slow, feeling every bit of it move from him. He still stared along the rifle sights at the target where the woman had been. At the platform rim, Mr. Dark looked down at the screaming crowd and what they were screaming about. "She's fainted! No, she slipped! She's shot!" At last Charles Holloway came to stand by the illustrated man, looking down. There were many things in his face: surprise, dismay, and some small, strange relief and satisfaction. The woman was lifted and put on the platform. Her mouth was frozen open, almost with a look of recognition. He knew she was dead. In a moment the crowd would know. He watched the illustrated man's hand move down to touch, trace, feel for life. Then Mr. Dark lifted both her hands like a doll in some marionette strategy to give her motion, but the body refused. So I gave one of the witch's arms to the dwarf, the other to the skeleton. They shook and moved them in a ghastly semblance of reawakening as the crowd backed. Dead, but there's no wound. Shock, you think? Shock, thought Charles Holloway. My God, did that kill her, or the other bullet? When I fired the shot, did she suck the other bullet down her throat? Did she choke on my smile? Oh, Christ. "It's all right, show's over, just fainted," said Mr. Dark. "All in act, all part of the show," he said, not looking at the woman, not looking at the crowd, but looking at Will, who stood blinking around out of the nightmare and fresh into the next, as his father stood with him, and Mr. Dark cried, "Everyone home, show's over, lights, lights." The carnival lights flickered. The crowd, herded before the failing illumination, turned like a great carousel, and as the lamps dimmed, hustled toward the few remaining pools of light, as if to warm themselves there before braving the wind. One by one, the lights indeed were going off. "Light," said Mr. Dark. "Jump," said Will's father. Will jumped. Will ran with his father, who still carried the weapon that had fired the smile that had killed the gypsy and put her to dust. "Is Jim in there?" They were at the maze. Behind them, on the platform, Mr. Dark bellowed, "Lights, go home, all over, done." "Is Jim in there?" wondered Will. Yes, he is." Inside the wax museum, Jim had still not moved, had not blinked. "Jim!" the voice came through the maze. Jim moved. Jim blinked. A rear exit door stood wide. Jim blundered toward it. "I'm coming for you, Jim." "No, Dad." Will caught at his father, who stood at the first turn of the mirrors with the pain come back to his hand, racing up along the nerves to strike a fireball near his heart. "Dad, don't go in." Will grabbed his good arm. Behind them, the platform was empty. Mr. Dark was running. Where? Somewhere. As the night shut in, the lights went off. The night sucked around, gathering, whistling, simpering. The crowd, like a shake of leaves from one huge tree, blew off the midway, and Will's father stood, facing the last tides, the waves, the gauntlet of horror he knew and waited for him to swim through, stride through, to fight the desiccation, the annihilation of oneself that waited there. He had seen enough to know. Eyes shut, you'd be lost. Eyes open, you'd know such utter despair, such gravities of anguish would weigh you. You might never drag past the 12th turn. But Charles Holloway took Will's hands away. "Jim's there. Jim, wait. I'm coming in." And Charles Holloway took the next step into the maze. Ahead flowed sluices of silver light, deep slabs of shadow, polished white, rinsed with images of themselves and others whose souls passing scoured the glass with their agony, curried the cold ice with their narcissism, or sweated the angles and flats with their fear. "Jim!" He ran. Will ran. They stopped, for the lights in here were going blind one by one, going dim, changing color, now blue, now like a color like lilac summer lightning, which flared in halos, then a flicker light, like 1,000 ancient wind-blown candles, and between himself and Jim, in need of rescue, stood an army of 1,000,000 sick-mouthed, frost-haired, white, time-bearded men. "Them, all of them," he thought. "That's me." "Dad," thought Will at his back. "Don't be afraid. It's you, only you. It's all only my father." But he did not like their look. They were so old, so very old, and got much older as the farther away they marched. Wildly gesticulating, his dad threw up his hands to fend off the revelation this wild image repeated to insanity. "Dad," he thought, "it's you," but it was more, and all the lights went out, and both squeezed still, in muffled, gasping silence, stood afraid. 49. A hand dug like a mole in the dark, Will's hand. It emptied his pockets, it delved, it rejected, it dug again. For while it was dark, he knew those 1,000,000 old men might march, hustle, rush, leap, smash Dad with what they were. In this shut-up night, with just 4 seconds to think of them, they might do anything to Dad if Will didn't hurry, these legions from time future, all the alarms of coming life. So mean, raw, and true you couldn't deny that's how Dad would look tomorrow, next day, the day after that. That cattle run of possible years might sweep Dad under, so quick. Who had more pockets than a magician? A boy. Whose pockets contained more than a magician's? A boy's. Will's seized forth kitchen matches. "Oh God, Dad, here." He struck the match. The stampede was close. They had come running. Now fixed by light, they widened their eyes, as did Dad, amazed their mouths at their own ancient quakes and masquerades. "Halt!" the match had cried. The platoon's left, squad's right, had still muscled themselves to fitful rest, to baleful glare, itching for the match to whiff out, then given lease to run next time. They'd hit this old, very old, much older, terribly old man, suffocate him with fates in one instant. "No," said Charles Holloway. "No." 1,000,000 dead lips moved. Will thrust the match forward. In the mirrors, a wizened multiplication of boy-apes did likewise, posing a single rosebud of blue-yellow flame. "No." Every glass threw javelins of light which invisibly pierced, sank deep, found heart, soul, lungs, defrost the veins, cut nerves, send Will to ruin, paralyze, and then kick football heart. Hamstrung, the old man foundered to his knees, as did his suppliant images, his congregation of terrified selves in 1 week, 1 month, 2 years, 20, 50, 70, 90 years from now, every second, minute, and long after midnight hour of his possible survival into insanity. There all sank gray or more yellow as the mirrors ricocheted him through, bled him lifeless, smelt him dry, then threatened to whiff him to skeletal dust and litter his mouth ashes to the floor. "No." Charles Holloway struck the match from his son's hand. "Dad, don't!" For in the new dark, the restive herd of old men shambled forward, hearts hammering. "Dad, we gotta see." He struck the second and final match, and in the flare saw Dad sunk down, eyes clenched, fists tight, and all those other men who would have Have to shunt, crawl, scramble on knees once this last light was gone. Will grabbed his father's shoulder and shook him. "Oh, Dad, Dad, I don't care how old you are, ever. I don't care anything. Oh, Dad," he cried, waving "I love you," at which Charles Holloway opened his eyes and saw himself and others like himself and his son behind, holding him, the flame trembling, the tears trembling on his face, and suddenly, as before, the image of the witch, the memory of the library, defeat for one, victory for another, swam before him, mixed with sound of rifle shot, flight of marked bullets, surge of fleeing crowd. For only a moment longer he looked at all of themselves at will. A small sound escaped his mouth, a little larger sound escaped his mouth, and then at last he gave the maze, the mirrors, and all time ahead, beyond, around, above, behind, beneath, or squandered inside himself, the only answer possible. He opened his mouth very wide and let the loudest sound of all free. The witch, if she were alive, would have known that sound and died again. 50. Jim Nightshade, out of the back door of the maze, lost all the carnival grounds. Running, stopped. The illustrated man somewhere along the back tents. Running, stopped. The door froze. The skeleton turned. All had heard. Not the sound that Charles Holloway made, no, but the terrific sounds that followed. One mirror alone, and then a second mirror, followed by a pause, and then a third mirror, and then a fourth, and another, and another, and another after that, and still another, and another after that. In domino fashion they formed swift spider webs over their fierce stares, and then with faint tinkles and sharp cracks fell. 1 minute there was this incredible Jacob's ladder of glass, folding, refolding, and folding away yet again, images pressed in a book of light. The next, all shattered to meteor of precipitation. The illustrated man, halted, listening, felt his own eyes, crystal, almost spiderweb, and splinter with the sounds. It was as if Charles Holloway, once more a choir boy in a strange sub-demon church, had sung the most beautiful high note of amiable humor ever in his life, which first shook moth silver from the mirror backs, then shook images from glass faces, then shook glass itself to ruin, 12, 100, 1,000 mirrors, and with them the ancient images of Charles Holloway sank earthward in delicious moonfalls of snow and sleety water, all because of the sound he had let come from his lungs, through his throat and out of his mouth. All because he accepted everything at last, accepted the carnival, the hills beyond, the people in the hills, Jim, Will, and above all, himself and all of life, and accepting threw back his head for the second time tonight and showed his acceptance with sound. And lo, like Jericho musical thunders, the glass gave up its ghosts, Charles Holloway cried out and released. He took his hands from his face, fresh starlight and dying carnival glow rushed in to set him free. The reflected dead men were gone, buried under the symboled slide, the splash and surfing of glass at his feet. Lights, lights, a far voice cried away, want more warmth. The illustrated man, unfrozen, vanished among the tents. The crowd was now gone. "Dad, what'd you do?" But the match burned Will's fingers. He dropped it, but now there was a dim light enough to see Dad shuffle the trash, to stir the mess of mirrored glass, heading back through the empty places where the maze had been and was no more. Jim. A door stood open. Pale carnival illumination, fading, poured through to show them wax figures of murderers and murderees. Jim did not sit among them. "Jim!" They stared at the open door through which Jim had run to be lost in the swarms of night between black canvases. The last electric bulb went out. "We'll never find him now," said Will. "Yes," said his father, standing in the dark. "We'll find him." Where? Will thought, and stopped. Far down the midway. The carousel steamed. The calliope tortured itself with musics. There, thought Will. If Jim's anywhere, it's there, to the music. Old funny Jim, the free ride ticket hid in his pocket still, I bet. "Oh, darn Jim, darn him," he cried. And then thought, "No, don't you. He's darned already, or near it. So how do we find him in the dark? No matches, no lights, just the two of us, all of them, and us alone in our territory." In their territory. "How?" said Will aloud, but his father said, "There," very softly, with gratitude, and Will stepped to the door, which was lighter now. The moon, thank God, it was rising from the hills. The police, no time. It's the next few minutes or nothing. 3 people we gotta worry about. The freaks. 3 people, Will. Number 1, Jim. Number 2, Mr. Cougar frying in his electric chair. Number 3, Mr. Dark and his skin full of souls. Say 1, kick the other 2 to H, and gone. Then I think the freaks go too. You ready, Will? Will eyed the door of the tents, the dark, the sky with new light paling it. God bless the moon. Hands tight together. They stepped out the door. As if to greet them, the wind flung up and down all the tent canvases in a great prehistoric thunderkite display of leprous wings. 51. They ran in urine smell of shadow, they ran in clean ice smell of moon, the calliope steam throb whispered, tatted, trilled. The music, thought Will. Is it running backward or forward? Which way? Dad whispered. Through here, Will pointed. 100 yards off, beyond a foothill of tents, there was a flare of blue light. Sparks jumped up and fell away, then dark again. Mr. Electrico, thought Will. They're trying to move him. Sure, get him to the merry-go-round. Kill or cure. And if they cure him, then, oh gosh, then it's angry him, an angry illustrated man against just Dad and me. And Jim? Well, where was Jim? This way one day, that way the next, and tonight, whose side would he wind up on? Ours. Old friend Jim. Ours, of course. But Will trembled. Did friends last forever, then? For eternity? Could they be counted to warm, round, and handsome some? Will glanced left. The dwarf stood half enfolded by tent flaps, waiting, motionless. Dad, look, cried Will softly. And there the skeleton, further over the tall man, the man all marble bone and Egyptian papyrus, stood like a dead tree. The freaks, why don't they stop us? Scared. Of us? Will's father crouched and squinted out from around an empty cage. They're walking wounded anyway. They saw what happened to the witch. That's the only answer. Look at them. And there they stood like uprights, like tent poles, spotted all through the meadow's grounds. Hiding in shadow, waiting. For what? Will swallowed hard. Maybe not hiding at all, but spread out for the running flight to come. At the right time, Mr. Dark would yell, and they'd just circle in, but the time wasn't right. Mr. Dark was busy. When he'd done what must be done, then he'd give that yell. So, thought Will. We'd got to see he never yells at all. Will's feet slithered in the grass. Will's father moved ahead. The freaks watched with moon-glass eyes as they passed. The calliope changed. It whistled sadly, sweetly, around a curve of tents, around a river flow of darkness. It's going ahead, thought Will. Yes, it was going backward. But now it stopped and started again, this time forward. But what's Mr. Dark up to? Jim, Will burst out. Shh. Dad shook him. But the name had tumbled from his mouth only because he heard the calliope summoning the golden years ahead, felt Jim isolate somewhere, pulled by warm gravities, swung by sunrise notes, wondering what it could be like to stand 16, 17, 18 years tall, and then 19, and a most incredible 20. The great wind of time blew in the brass pipes, a fine, jolly summer tune, promising everything, and even Will, hearing, and began to run toward the music, grew up like a peach tree full of sun-ripe fruit. No, he thought, and instead made his feet step to his own fear, jumped to his own tune, a hum cramped back by throat, held fast by lungs which shook the bones of his head and drowned the calliope away. There, said Dad softly, and between the tents ahead in transit they saw a grotesque parade, like a dark sultan in a palanquin. A half-familiar figure rode a chair borne on the shoulders of assorted sizes and shapes of darkness. At Dad's cry the parade jolted, then broke into a run. Mr. Electrico, said Will. They're taking him to the carousel. The parade vanished. A tent lay between them. Around here, Will jumped, pulling his father. The calliope played sweet, to pull Jim, to draw Jim. And when the parade arrived with Electrico, back the music would spin, back the carousel run, to shard away his skin, to freshen forth his ears. Will stumbled, fell. Dad picked him up, and then it arose, a human barking, gapping, baying, whining, as if all had fallen. And a long-drawn moan, a gasp, a shuddering sigh, and an entire crowd of people with crippled throats made chorus together. Jim, they've got Jim. No, murmured Charles Holloway strangely. Maybe Jim or us got them. They stepped around the last tent. Wind blew dust in their faces. Will clapped his hand up, squinched his nose. The dust was antique spice, burnt maple leaves, a prickling blue that teemed and sifted to earth. Swarming its own shadows, the dust filtered over the tents. Charles Holloway sneezed. Figures jumped and scurried away for the upended, half-tilted object abandoned halfway between one tent and the carousel. The object was the electric chair, capsized, with straps dangling from wooden arms and legs, and a metal head cap hanging from its top. But, said Will, where's Mr. Electrico? I mean Mr. Cooker. That must have been him. What must have been him? And the answer is there, sifting down the midway in the whirling wind devils, the burnt spicy autumn incense that had floored them when they turned this corner. Kill or cure, Charles Holloway thought. He imagined them rushed in the last few seconds, toting the ancient dust sack bone heap over starched grasses in his disconnected chair, perhaps only one in running series of attempts to foster, encourage, preserve life in what was really nothing but a mortuary junk pile, rust flakes and dying coals that no wind could blow alight again. Yet they must try. How many times in the last 24 hours had they run out on such excursions, only in panic to cease activity because the merest jolt, the slightest breath, threatened to shake old ancient Cougar down to meal mush and chaff? Better to leave him propped in an electric warm chair, a continual exhibit, an ever-going-on performance for gaping audiences, and try again, but especially try now when the lights out and crowds herded off in the dark, all threatened by one smile and a bullet. There is need of Cougar as he once was, tall, flame-headed, and riven with earthquake violence, but somewhere 10 seconds ago, the last glue crumbled, the last bolt of life fell free, and the mummy doll, the erector set, grotesque, disencumbered itself in smoke puffs and November leaflets, and broadcast immortality along the wind. Mr. Cougar, threshed in a final harvest, was now a billion parchment flecks, tumbled sea scrolls capered in meadows, a mere dust explosion in a silo of ancient grain, gone. "Oh, no, 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 no," someone murmured. Charles Holloway touched Will's arm. Will stopped saying, "Oh, no, no, no." He, too, in the last few moments, had thought the same as his father of the toted corpse, the strown bone meal, the mineral-enriched hills of grass. Now there was only the empty chair and the last particles of mica, the radiant motes of peculiar dirt, crusting the straps, and the freaks who had been toting the Baroque dump now fled to the shadows. We made them run, thought Will, but something made them drop it. No, not something, someone. Will flexed his eyes. The carousel, deserted, empty, traveled on its way through its own special time forward, but between the fallen chair and the carousel, standing alone, was that a freak? No. Jim! Dad knocked his elbow and Will shut up. Jim thought. And where now was Mr. Dark? Somewhere, for he had started the carousel, hadn't he? Yes, to draw them, to draw Jim. And what else? Right now, there was no time, for Jim turned from the spilled chair, turned and walked slowly toward the free ride. He was going where he had always known he must go, like a weather vane in wild seasons. He had trimmered this way, wandered that, hesitated upon bright horizons and warm directions, only at last now to tilt and half sleepwalking, tremble about in the bright brass pool in summer march of music. He could not look away. Another step, and then another toward the merry-go-round. There went Jim. "Go get him, Will," said his father. Will went. Jim raised his right hand. The brass poles flashed by into the future, pulling the flesh like syrup, stretching the bones like taffy, the sun-metal color burning Jim's cheeks, glinting his eyes. Jim reached the brass poles, flick knocked his fingernails, tinkling their own small tune. Jim! The brass poles chopped by in a yellow sunrise at night. The music leaped in a clear fountain high. "Ee!" Jim opened his mouth with the same cry. "Ee!" "Jim!" cried Will, running. Jim's palm slapped on brass pole. The pole whipped on. He slapped another brass pole. This time his palm glued itself tight. Wrist followed fingers, arm followed wrist, shoulder and body followed arm. Jim sleepwalked, was torn from his roots in the earth. "Jim!" Will reached, felt Jim's foot flick from his grasp. Jim swung round the wailing night in a great dark summer circle, Will racing after. "Jim, get off! Jim, don't leave me here!" Flung by centrifuge, Jim grasped the pole with one hand, spun, and, as if by some lone, lost, and final instinct, gestured his other hand free to trail on the wind, the one part of him, the small white separate part that still remembered their friendship. "Jim, jump!" Will snatched for that hand, missed, stumbled, almost fell. The first race was lost. Jim must circle once, alone. Will stood waiting the next charge of horses, the fling about of boy, not so much boy. "Jim, Jim!" Jim awoke. Circle half round. His face showed now July, now December. He seized the pole, bleeding out his despair. He wanted. He did not want. He wished, he rejected, he ardently wished again, in flight, in heat-spell river of wind and blaze of metal, in jog of July and August horses, whose hoofs thudded the air like thrown fruit. His eyes blazed, tongue clamped in his teeth. He hissed his frustration. "Jim, jump! Dad, stop the machine!" Charles Holloway turned to see where the control box stood, 50 feet off. "Jim!" Will's side was stabbed with pain. "I need you! Come back!" And far over away, on the far side of the carousel, traveling, fast traveling, Jim fought with his own hands the pole. The empty, wind-whipped journey, the growing night, the wheeling stars. He let go of the pole, he grabbed it, and still his right hand trailed down and out, begging Will's last full ounce of strength. "Jim!" Jim came round. There below, in the black night station from which the train pulled away forever, in a flurry of ticket-punch confetti, he saw William Holloway, young pal, young friend who had seemed younger still at the end of this journey, and not just young, but unknown. vaguely remembered from some other time and some other year, but now that boy, that friend, that younger friend, ran along by that train, reached up asking passage, or demanding he get off, which? Just remember me. Will lunged his final lunge. Fingers touched fingers, palm touched palm. Jim's face, white cold, stared down. Will trot paced the circling machine. Where was Dad? Why didn't he shut it off? Jim's hand was a warm hand, a familiar, a good hand. It closed on his. He gripped it, yelling, Jim, please. But still they spun on the journey. Jim borne, Will dragged in a jog-crazy trot. Please, Will jerked. Jim jerked. Trapped by Jim, Will's hand was shot with July heat. It went like a capped animal, held and fondled by Jim, along around into older times, so his hand, fast traveling, would be alien to himself, knowing things by night that he himself abed might only guess. 14-year-old boy, 15-year-old hand. Jim had it, yes. Cramped it tight and would not let it go. And Jim's face, was it older from the journey around? Was he 15 now, going on 16? Will pulled. Jim pulled opposite. Will fell on the machine. Both rode the night. Olive Will rode with friend Jim now. Jim, Dad, how easy it might be to just stand, ride, go around with Jim. If he couldn't pull Jim off, just leave him on, and dear pals travel. The juices of his body swam, blinding his sight. They drummed his ears, shot electric jolts through his loins. Jim shouted, Will shouted. They traveled half a year in slithering orchard warm dark before Will seized Jim's arm tight and dared to leap from so much promise, so many fine, tall, growing-up years, flail out, off, down, pull Jim with. But Jim could not let go of the pull, could not give up the ride. Will! Jim, half between machine and friend, one hand on each, screamed. It was like a great tearing of cloth or flesh. Jim's eyes went blind as the statues, the carousel whirled. Jim screamed, fell, spun crazily in the air. Will tried to break his fall, but Jim struck earth rolling. He lay silent. Charles Holloway hit the carousel control switch. Empty, the machine slowed. Its horses paced themselves down from their trot toward some far midsummer night. Together Charles Holloway and his son knelt by Jim to touch his wrist, to put his ear to his chest. Jim's eyes, skinned white, were fixed on the stars. Oh, God, cried Will. Is he dead? 52. Dead? Will's father moved his hand over that cold face, the cold chest. I don't feel a long way off. Someone cried for help. They looked up. A boy came running down the midway, bumping into ticket booths, falling over tent ropes, looking back over his shoulder. Help! He's after me, the boy cried. The terrible man! I want to go home! The boy flung himself forward and grabbed at Will's father. Oh, help! I'm lost! I don't like it! Take me home! That man with the tattoos, Mr. Dark, asked Will. Yes, gibbered the boy. He's down that way. Oh, stop him! Will, his father rose. Take care of Jim. Artificial respiration. All right, boy. The boy trotted off. This way. Following Charles Holloway, watched the distraught boy who led him on. Observed his head, his frame, the way his pelvis hung from his spine. Boy, he said from the shadowed merry-go-round, 20 feet around from where Will bent to Jim. What's your name? No time, cried the boy. Jed. Quick, quick. Charles Holloway stopped. Jed, he said. The boy no longer moved, but turned, chafing his elbows. How old are you, Jed? 9, said the boy. My gosh, this is no time. This is a fine time, Jed, said Charles Holloway. Only 9? So young. I was never that young. Holy cow, shouted the boy angrily. Or unholy something, said the man, and reached out. The boy backed away. You're only afraid of one man, Jed. Me. You, the boy still backed off. Cut it out. Why? Because sometimes good has weapons and evil none. Sometimes tricks fail. Sometimes people can't be picked off, led to deadfalls. No divide and conquer tonight, Jed. Where were you taking me, Jed? To some lion's cage you got fixed and ready? To some sideshow like the mirrors? To someone like the witch? What, Jed? What? Let's just roll up your right shirt sleeve, shall we, Jed? The great moonstone eyes flashed at Charles Holloway. The boy leaped back, but not before the man had leaped with him, seized his arm and grabbed the back of his shirt, and instead of simply rolling up the sleeve at first suggested, tore the entire shirt off the boy's body. Why, yes, Jed, said Charles Holloway, almost quietly, just as I thought. You. Yes, Jed, me. But especially you. Look at you. And look he did, for there, on the back of the small boy's hand, on the fingers and up along the wrists scrambled blue serpents, blue venomed snake eyes, blue scorpions scuttling about, blue shark maws, which gaped eternally hungry to feed upon all the freaks crammed and stung, sewn cheek by jowl, skin to skin, flesh to flesh, all up and down the chest, the tiny torso, and tucked in the secret gathering places on this small, very small body, this cold and now shocked and trembling body. Why, Jed, that's fine artwork, that is. You, the boy struck. Yes, still me. Charles Holloway took the blow in the face and clamped a vice on the boy. No, oh yes, said Charles Holloway. Using just his good right hand, his ruined left hand hanging limp. Yes, Jed, jump, squirm, go ahead. It was a fine idea. Get me off alone, fix me, then go back and get Will. And when the police come, why, you're just a boy, 9 or 10, and the carnival. Oh no, it's not yours. It doesn't belong to you. Stay here, Jed. Why are you trying to get out from under my arm? The police looked and the owners of the show have vanished. Isn't that it, Jed? A fine escape? You can't hurt me, the boy shrieked. Funny, said Charles Holloway. I think I can. He pressed the boy almost lovingly close, very close. Murder, wailed the boy. Murder. I'm not going to murder you, Jed. Mr. Dark, however, whatever you like. You're going to murder yourself because you can't stand being near people like me. Not this close. Close. Not this long. Evil, groaned the boy, writhing. You're evil. Evil? Will's father laughed, which made the boy, wasp-stung and brambled by the sound, jerk all the more violently. Evil? The man's hand wore fly-paper fastened to the small bones. Strange hearing that from you, Jed. So it must seem. Good to evil seems evil. So I will do only good to you, Jed. I will simply hold you and watch you poison yourself. I will do good to you, Jed. Mr. Dark, Mr. Proprietor, boy, until you tell what's wrong with Jim. Wake him up. Let him free. Give him life. Can't. The boy's voice fell down a well inside his body, fading away. Can't. You mean you won't? Can't. All right, boy, all right. Then there and here and this and this. They looked like father and son, long apart, passionately met, embraced, yet more embraced, as the man lifted his wounded hand to gently touch the stricken faces. The crowd, the team of illustrations shivered and flew, now this way and that, and microscopic forays quickly abandoned. The boy's eyes swiveled wildly, fixed upon the man's mouth. He saw there the strange and somehow lovely smile once flung at beautification to the witch. He gathered the boy somewhat closer and thought, evil has only the power that we give it. I give you nothing. I take back. Starve, starve, starve. The two matchstick lights in the boy's affrighted eyes blew out. The boy and his stricken and bruised conclave of monsters, his felt but half-seen crowd, fell to earth. There stood but a roar like a mountain slid to ruin. But there was only a rustle like a Japanese paper lantern dropped in the dust. 53. Charles Holloway stood for a long while, breathing deep, lungs aching, looking down at the body. The shadows swooned and fluttered, and all the canvas alleys were odd assorted sizes of freaks and people, fleshed out in their own terrors and sins, held to poles, moaning a disbelief. Somewhere the skeleton moved out in the light. Somewhere else the dwarf almost knew who he was, and scuttled forth like a crab from a cave, to blink and blink again at Will, bent working over Jim, at Will's father, bent to exhaustion over the still form of the silent boy, while the merry-go-round at last, slow, came to a stop, rocking like a ferry-boat in the watery blowing grass. The carnival was a great dark hearth, lit with gathered coals as shadows came to stare and fire their gaze with a tableau by the carousel. There in the moonlight lay the illustrated boy named Dark. There lay dragons slaughtered, towers ruined, monsters from dim ages toppled into rusted coinage, pterodactyls smushed like biplanes from old and always meaningless wars, crustacea the color of emeralds abandoned on a white sand shore where the tide of life was going out, all the illustrations changing now, shifting, shriveling as the small flesh cooled. There the obscene wink of the navel eye gasped down on itself, and there the nipple iris of a trumpeting mastodon went blind and raved at its blindness, each and every picture remembered from the tall Mr. Dark, now rendered down to miniature canvas, pronged and forked over a boy's tennis racket bones. More freaks, with faces the color of beds, where so many lost the battle of souls, emerged from the shadows to glide in great and ever more curious carousel motion about Charles Holloway and his dropped burden. Will paused in his desperate push and relaxation, trying to shape Jim back to life, unafraid of the watchers in the dark. No time for that. Even if there were time, these freaks, he sensed, were breathing the night as if they had not been fed on such rare fine air in years, and as Charles Holloway watched, and the foxfire, lobster-moist, flim-trapped eyes watched from distances, the boy who had been Mr. Dark grew yet colder as death cut the timbers of nightmares and the calligraphies, the smoky lightings of sketch that coiled and crouched and soared like terrible banners of a lost war, began to vanish one by one from the strewn small body. A score of freaks glanced fearfully around, as if the moon had suddenly filled itself full and they could see. They chafed their wrists as if chains had fallen from them, chafed their necks as if weights had crumbled from their bowed shoulders. Stumbled forth after long entombments, they blinked swiftly, disbelieving the packet of their misery sprawled near the spent carousel. If they dared, they might have bent to tremble their hands over that suddenly death-sweet mouth. The marbling brow, as it was they watched, benumbed as their portrait pictures, the vital stuffs of their mortal greed, rancor, and poisonous guilt, the emerald abstracts of their self-blinded eyes, self-wounded mouths, self-trapped bodies melted one by one from this insignificant mound of snow. There melted the skeleton, there the sidewise scuttling crayfish dwarf, now the lava sipper took leave of autumn flesh, followed by the black executioner from London dock. There soared off and gone went the human Montgolfier, the balloon man, the avoirdupois, the magnificent, deflated to purest air. There fled mobs and bands as death washed the drawing board clean. Now there lay just a plain dead boy, unbruised by pictures, staring up at the stars with Mr. Dark's empty eyes. Ah! In a chorus of release, the strange people in the shadows sighed. Perhaps the calliope gave a last ringmaster's bark. Perhaps thunder turned sleeping in the clouds. Suddenly all wheeled about. The freaks stampeded. North, south, east, west, free of tent, master, dark law, free above all of each other. They ran like albino pigs, tuskless boars, and stricken sloths before storms. It must have been, it seemed. Each yanked a rope, loosed a tent peg, running. For now the sky was shaken with fatal respiration, the breathing down, the in-sunk rattle and pool of collapsing darkness as the tents gave way. With hiss of viper, swirl of cobra, the ropes insanely raveled, slithered, snapped, cut grass with frictioned whips. The networks of vast main freak tent convulsed, parted bones, small from medium, and medium from brontosaur magnificent, all swayed with impending fall. The menagerie tent shut up like a dark Spanish fan. Other small tents, caped figures in the meadow, fell down at the wind's command. Then at last the freak tent, the great melancholy mothering reptile bird, after a moment of indecision, sucked in a Niagara of blizzard air, broke loose 300 hempen snakes, crack-rattled its black side poles so they fell like teeth from a cyclopean jaw, slammed the air with acres of molded wing, as if trying to kite away, but earth, tethered, must succumb to plain and most simple gravity, must be crushed by its own locked bulk. Now this greatest tent stilled out hot, raw breaths of earth, confetti that was ancient, when the canals of Venice were not yet staked, and wafts of pink cotton candy like tired feather bows. In rushing downfalls the tent shed skin, grieved, salt as flesh fell away, until at last the tall museum timbers at the spine of the discarded monster dropped with 3 cannon roars. The calliope simmered, moronic with wind. The train stood, an abandoned toy in a field. The freak oil paintings clapped hands high on the last standing pennant poles, then plummeted to earth. The skeleton, the only strange one left, bent to pick up the body of the porcelain boy who was Mr. Dark. He moved away into the fields. Will, in a swift moment, saw the thin man in his burden go over a hill among all the footprints of the vanished carnival waste. Will's face shadowed this way, then that, pulled by the swift concussions, the tumults, the deaths, the fleeing away of souls. Cougar, dark, skeleton, dwarf, who is lightning rod salesman, don't run, come back, Miss Foley. Where are you? Mr. Crossetti, it's over, be still, quiet, it's all right, come back, come back. But the wind was blowing their footprints out of the grass so they might run forever now, trying to outflee themselves. So Will turned back astride Jim and pushed the chest and let go. Pushed and let go, then trembling touched his dear friend's cheek. Jim? But Jim was cold as spaded to earth. 54. Beneath the cold was a fugitive warmness, in the white skin lay some small color, but when Will felt Jim's wrist there was nothing, and when he put his ear to the chest there was nothing. He's dead. Charles Holloway came to his son and his son's friend, and knelt down to touch the quiet throat, the unstirred rib cage. No, puzzled, not quite. Dead! The tears burst from Will's eyes, but then, as swiftly, he felt himself knocked, struck, shaken. Stop that, cried his father. You want to save him? It's too late. Oh, Dad, shut up, listen. But Will wept, and again his father hauled off and hit him, once on the left cheek, once on the right cheek, hard. All the tears in him were knocked flying. There were no more. Will, his father savagely jabbed a finger at him, and at Jim. Darn it, Willie, all these, Mr. Dark and his sort, they like crying. My God, they love tears. Jesus, God, the more you bawl, the more they drink the salt off your chin. Wail, and they suck your breath like cats. Get up, get off your knees, darn it. Jump around, whoop and holler, you hear, shout. Will, sing, but most of all, laugh. You got that? Laugh. I can't. You must, it's all we got. I know, in the library. The witch ran, my God, how she ran. I shot her dead with it. A single smile, Willie. The night people can't stand it. The sun's there. They hate the sun. We can't take them seriously, Will. But Helen, you saw the mirrors, and the mirrors showed me half in, half out the grave. Showed me all wrinkles and rot, blackmailed Miss Foley, so she joined the Grand March nowhere. Joined the fools who wanted everything. Idiot thing to want everything, poor darned fools. So wound up with nothing, like the dumb dog who dropped his bone to go after the reflection of the bone in the pond. Well, you saw, every mirror fell. like ice in a thaw, with no rock or rifle, no knife, just my teeth, tongue, and lungs. I gunshot those mirrors with pure contempt, knocked down 10 million scared fools, and let the real man get to his feet. Now on your feet, Will. But Jim, Will faltered, half in, half out. Jim's been that always, sore tempted. Now he went too far, and maybe he's lost, but he fought to save himself, right? Put his hand out to you, to fall free of the machine. So we finished that fight for it. Move. Will sailed up, giddily yanked. Run. Will sniffed again. Dad slapped his face. Tears flew like meteors. Hop, jump, yell. He banged. Will head shuffled with him, shoved his hand in his pockets, tearing them inside out until he pulled forth a bright object, a harmonica. Dad blew a chord. Will stopped, staring down at him. Dad clouded him on the ear. Run, don't look. Will ran a step. Dad blew another chord, yanked Will's elbow, flung each of his arms. Sing, what? Good boy, anything. The harmonica tried a bad Swanee River. Dad. Will shuffled, shaking his head, immensely tired. Silly, sure, we want that. Silly, darn fool, man. Silly harmonica, bad off-key tune. Dad whooped. He circled like a dancing crane. He was not in silliness yet. He wanted to crack through. He had to break the moment. Will, louder, funnier, as the man said. Oh, hell, don't let them drink your tears and want more, Will. Don't let them take your crying, turn it upside down, and use it for their own smile. I'll be darned if death wears my sadness for glad rags. Don't feed them one darn thing, Lily. Loosen your bones, breathe, blow. He seized Willie's hair, shook him. Nothing funny. Sure there is. Me, you, Jim, all of us, the whole shooting works. Look. And Charles Holloway pulled faces, popped his eyes, mashed his nose, winked, convorted like chimpanzee ape, waltzed with the wind, tap-danced the dust, threw back his head to bay at the moon, dragging Will with him. Death's funny, G-diot. Bend 2-3, Will. Soft shoe. Way down upon Swanee River. What's next, Will? Far, far away. Will, your god-awful voice. Darned girl soprano, sparrow with a tin can. Jump, boy. Will went up, came down, cheeks hotter, wincing like lemons in his throat. He felt balloons grow in his chest. Dad sucked the silver harmonica. That's where the old folks, Will spoke. Stay. Bellowed his father. Shuffle, tap, bounce, jog. Where was Jim? Jim was forgotten. Dad jabbed his ribs, tickling. The Camptown ladies sing this song. Doo-dah, yelled Will. Doo-dah. He sang it now with a tune. The balloon grew. His throat tickled. Camptown racetrack 5 miles long. Oh, doo-dah day. Man and boy did a minuet. In a mid-step it happened. Will felt the balloon grow huge within him. He smiled. What? Dad was surprised by those teeth. Will snorted. Will giggled. What? Say, asked Dad. The force of the exploding warm balloon alone shoved Will's teeth apart, kicked his head back. Dad! Dad! He bounded. He grabbed Dad's hand. He raced crazily, hollering, quacking like a duck, clucking like a chicken. His palms hit his throbbing knees. Dust flew off his soles. Oh, Susanna! Oh, don't you cry for me, for I come from Alabama with a banjo on my knee. Together. Knee. The harmonica knocked teeth wheezing. Dad hawked forth great chords of squeeze-eyed hilarity, turning in a circle, jumping up to kick his heels. Ha! They collided, half-collapsed, knocked elbows, cracked heels, which blew the air out faster. Ha! Oh, God! Ha! Oh, God, Will! Ha! Weak ha! In the middle of wild laughter, a sneeze, they spun, they stared. Who lay there in the moonlit earth? Jim? Jim Nightshade? Had he stirred? Was his mouth wider, his eyelids quivering? Were his cheeks pinker? Don't look, Dad swung Will handily round in a further wheel. They do-si-doed, hands extended, the harmonica seeping and guzzling wild tunes from a father who storked his legs and turkeyed his arms. They hopped Jim one way, hopped back as if he were but a lump stone on the grass. Someone's in the kitchen with Dinah, someone's in the kitchen. Oh, I know, oh. Jim's tongue slid out on his lips. No one saw this, or if they saw, they ignored it. Fearing it might pass, Jim did the final things himself. His eyes opened. He watched the dancing fools. He could not believe he had been off on a journey of years, now returned. No one said hi. All jigged sambo style. Tears might have jumped to his eyes, but before they could start, Jim's mouth curved. He gave up a ghost of laughter, after all, there indeed was silly Will, and his silly old janitor Dad racing like gorillas knuckle-dusting the meadows, their faces of puzzlement. They toppled above him, clapped hands, wiggled ears, bent to wash them all over with their now bright, full, river-flowing laughter that could not be stopped if the sky fell or the earth rent open, to blend their good mirth with his, to fuse light and set him off in a detonation which could not stop exploding from ladyfingers to 4-inchers to doomsday cannon crackers of delight. And looking down, Jolt dancing his bones loose and delicious, Will thought, Jim don't remember he was dead, so we don't tell, not now, some day, sure, but not doo-dah, doo-dah. They didn't even say hello, Jim, or join the dance. They just put out hands as if he had fallen for their swing pandemonium commotion and needed a boost back into the swarm. Then they yanked Jim. Jim flew. Jim came down dancing, and Will knew hand in hand, hot palm to palm. They had truly yelled, sung, gladly shouted the live blood back. They had slung Jim like a newborn, knocked his lungs, slapped his back, shocked joy's breath to where it made room. Then Dad bent and Will leapt over him, and Will bent and Dad jumped him, and they both waited, crouched in a line, wheezing songs deliciously tired, while Jim swallowed spit and ran full tilt. He got half over Dad when they all fell and rolled in the grass. All hoot, owl, and donkey, all brass and cymbal as it must have been in the first year of the creation, and joy not yet thrown for the garden, until at last they drew up their feet, socked each other's shoulders, embraced knees tight, rocking and looking with swift, bright happiness at each other, growing wine-drunkenly quiet. And when they were done, smiling at each other's faces as at burning torches, they looked away across the field, and black tent poles lay in elephant boneyards, with the dead tents blowing away like the petals of a great black rose. The only three people in a sleeping world, a rare trio of tomcats, they basked in the moon. "What happened?" asked Jim at last. "What didn't?" cried Dad, and they laughed again, and suddenly Will grabbed Jim, held him tight, and wept. "Hey," Jim said, over and over quietly. "Hey, hey, oh, Jim, Jim," Will said. "We'll be pals forever. Oh, hey, sure." Jim was very quiet now. "It's all right," said Dad. "Have a small cry. We're out of the woods. Then we'll laugh some more going home." Will let Jim go. They got to their feet and stood looking at each other. Will examined his father with fierce pride. "Oh, Dad, Dad, you did it, you did it." "No, we did it together. But without you, it'd be all over. Oh, Dad, I never knew you." "I sure know you now." "Do you, Will?" "Darn right." Each to each other shimmered in bright halos of wet light. "Why then, hello," reply son, and curtsy. Dad held out his hand. Will shook it. Both laughed and wiped their eyes, then looked quickly at the footprints scattered in the dew over the hills. "Dad, will they ever come back?" "No and yes." Dad tucked away his harmonica. "No, not them. But yes, other people like them. Not in a carnival. God knows what shape they'll come in next. By sunrise, noon, or the latest sunset tomorrow they'll show. They're on the road." "Oh no," said Will. "Oh yes," said Dad. "We gotta watch out for the rest of our lives. The fight's just begun." They moved around the carousel slowly. "What will they look like? How will we even know them?" "Why," said Dad quietly, "maybe they're already here." Both boys looked around swiftly, but there was only the meadow, the machine, and themselves. Will looked at Jim and his father, and then down at his own body and hands. He glanced up at Dad. Dad nodded once gravely, then nodded at the carousel, and stepped up on it and touched a brass pole. Will stepped up beside him. Jim stepped up beside Will. Jim stroked a horse's mane. Will patted a horse's shoulders. The great machine softly tilted in the tides of night. Just 3 times around ahead, thought Will. Hey. Just 4 times around ahead, thought Jim. Boy. Just 10 times around back, thought Charles Holloway. Lord. Each read the thoughts in the other's eyes. How easy, thought Will. Just this once, thought Jim. But then, thought Charles Holloway, once you start, you'd always come back. One more ride and one more ride, and after a while you'd offer rides to friends and more friends until finally, he thought hit him all in the same quiet moment. Finally you wind up owner of the carousel, keeper of the freaks, proprietor of some small part of eternity of the traveling dark carnival shows. Maybe, said their eyes, they're already here. Charles Holloway stepped back into the machinery of the merry-go-round, found a wrench, knocked the flywheels and cogs to pieces, then he took the boys out and he hit the control box 1 or 2 times until it broke and scattered fitful lightnings. Maybe this isn't necessary, said Charles Holloway. Maybe it wouldn't run anyway, without the freaks to give it power, but he hit the box the last time and threw down the wrench. It's late, must be midnight, straight up. Obediently the City Hall clock, the Baptist church clock, the Methodist, Episcopalian, the Catholic Church, all the clocks struck 12. The wind was seated with time. Last one to the railroad semaphore at Green Crossing is an old lady. The boys fired themselves off like pistols. The father hesitated only a moment. He felt the vague pain in his chest. If I run, he thought, what will happen? Is death important? No. Everything that happens before death is what counts, and we've done fine tonight. Even death can't spoil it. So there went the boys, and why not follow? He did just that. And Lord, it was a fine printing their life in the dew on the cold fields in the new, dark, suddenly light Christmas morning. The boys ran as tandem ponies, knowing that some day one would touch base first and the other second, or not at all. And now the first minute of the new morning was not the minute or the day or morning of ultimate loss. Now was not the time to study faces to see if one was older and the other too much younger. Today was just another day in October, and a year suddenly better than anyone supposed it could ever be. Just a short hour ago, and the moon and the stars moving in a grand rotation toward inevitable dawn, and then loping at the last of this night's weaving done, and Will laughing and singing, and Jim giving answer line by line as they breasted the waves of dry stubble toward a town where they might live another few years across from each other, and behind them jogged a middle-aged man with his own new, now solemn, now amiable thoughts. Perhaps the boys slowed. They never knew. Perhaps Charles Holloway quickened his pace. He could not say, but running even with the boys, the middle-aged man reached out. Will slapped, Jim slapped, Dad slapped the semaphore signal base at the same instant. Exultant, they banged a trio of shouts down the wind. Then, as the moon watched, the three of them together left the wilderness behind and walked into the town. Afterward, carnivals near and far, where ideas come from and how they finally arrive, are the largest mysteries in a life of writing. I imagine you would describe Something Wicked This Way Comes as a carnival far traveling from childhood to reach me in my almost middle years. It may well have begun when I was 4 and my mother lugged me onto a merry-go-round for a hysterical spin. For no sooner had the calliope sounded and the horses plunged into a gallop than Small Ray shrieked. My screams continued until the carousel operator Murderous stopped the horses and let us flee. Not long after that I saw Lon Chaney with a roller skate on his head slide down a high wire, fall and die in the arms of a beautiful young dancer, Loretta Young. That film, Laugh, Clown, Laugh, taught me what went on behind a clown's mask. Charlie Chaplin's The Circus came next, but I didn't want to run away and join it. I only became more curious about the strange life within the tents. And those same years, Lon Chaney filmed He Who Gets Slapped and Let Some Lions Loose in a House to Devour His Fiancee's Lover. With these events and films, my carnival was well on its way. I was 12 years old when it got its biggest jolt, when Mr. Electrico arrived on Labor Day weekend 1932, sat in his electric chair to be electrocuted, dubbed me with his fiery sword until my hair rose and sparks jumped from my nostrils and cried, "Live forever!" Next day I ran back to the carnival grounds to find out just how to do that. Mr. Electrico introduced me to all the carnival freaks behind the scenes, including the hippo lady, the human skeleton, and the illustrated man. We sat on the beach, and he listened to my grand ideas about my irresistible future. When I had run out of gas, Mr. Electrico said, "We've met before." "Oh, no, sir," I said. "This is the first time I've ever talked to you." "No, no," he said. "You are my best friend at the Battle of the Ardennes Forest outside Paris in October 19. We were wounded and died in my arms. And here you are with a new face, new name, but the light coming from your eyes is the soul of my lost friend. Welcome back to the world." I wandered out of the carnival, stunned, and stood by the rushing horses of the carousel listening to the calliope wheezing Beautiful Ohio and Wet. I knew that something amazing had struck me with electric fire and changed me forever. Within 8 weeks I began to write. I wrote every day after that for the next 65 years. So I imagine you could say it was only natural that when Gene Kelly invited me and my wife Maggie to a screening of his motion picture musical Invitation to the Dance, the carnival sequence in it would strike a final bolt. Walking home from the films, feeling much like that boy by the carousel on the long-ago September day in 1932, I said, "I'd give my right arm to write a screenplay for Gene Kelly." "Well, go through your files," Maggie said. "There are lots of clowns in there that smell funny and circuses that only come alive at 3 a.m. She was right. I found a story, The Black Ferris, that I had planned to use under the name Dark Carnival in my first book. The story was never finished, and the book Dark Carnival was published minus its title fantasy. And so I wrote an 80-page screenplay based on that unpublished tale in my far-traveling long after midnight carnival truly arrived. Kelly loved it, wanted to direct it and produce it, but could find no money and handed my carnival back to me. With the screen treatment dead, the novel came alive. I spent 5 years putting the Dark Train on track. The novel, now titled Something Wicked This Way Comes, was published in 1962. It then became a series of screenplays again and culminated in the 1983 Disney film. So there you have the long journey from carousel to carousel, circus to carnival, and my suspicions shared by Walt Disney that something was rotten in the Denmark behind the freak tent canvas. Disney created Disneyland as a bright antidote. He made a new world. I finished a novel with Mr. Electrico at its center, changed from a kind Christian mystic into an unfailingly evil cougar of Cougar and Dark's Pandemonium Shadow Show. If Mr. Electrico ever read this novel a long time back, I hope he forgave me for turning him inside out and upside down from high noon to eternal night. Part of me is still on that hideous carousel when I was 4. I seem never to have found a way to get off. Ray Bradbury, Los Angeles, December 1998. Thank you for listening to Ray Bradbury's Something Wicked This Way Comes. I'll put the jacket back on the books soon. Let me know what part of it meant the most to you or was your favorite.